This video is the second in a series of videos that is providing an overview and introduction to the Wales safeguarding procedures as they relate to adults at risk. This video in particular is going to look at section 2, which covers the duties to report an adult at risk of abuse and/or neglect. Before we start to consider the duty to report, it's important that we're clear about what the different stages of the safeguarding process are. This could be from the early point of working with an individual adult, where you may have some initial concerns about the individual, through to your concerns are triggering your concern and suspicion that they may be an adult at risk, through to the reports being made to the local authority and inquiries being carried out, and then through to action being taken in order to support the adult at risk. Regardless of where we are in the procedures, there are generally 5 key stages that we will follow during the process. The first of those being the gathering of information. What information do we have? What's the source of that information? What's it telling us? We will assess then and analyse that information, giving some thought to the potential for early help and support, whether the individual has a need for care and support, or whether that individual requires some protection. On the basis of that assessment and analysis, we will make our decisions and formulate our plans in terms of the most appropriate action. Stage 4, we put those actions and interventions in place, and we finish with stage 5, which is evaluating the effectiveness of the actions and interventions. The information gathering stage is where this journey starts, and within the procedures, you will see there are some pointers for practice that provide some guidance on the information that we will gather and how we make sense of that information. When we consider a proportionate response to adults at risk, we need to also think about the wider provisions of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, as was alluded to in section 1 video. When we think there is potential and we explore the potential for prevention and early help, we need to read across to part 2 of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, which covers the requirements in relation to the provision of information, advice and assistance, which covers the requirements to make sure that we've got appropriate preventative responses in place. If, however, we are supporting and working with an individual adult who has needs for care and support, or the potential to have needs for care and support that require social services support, then parts 3 and 4 of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act will apply. Part 3 covers our duties in relation to assessment. Part 4 covers our duties in relation to care and support planning. It could, however, be that the individual that we're working with is identified as being an adult at risk, and these procedures will then be implemented under Part 7 of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, which covers safeguarding. So when we're thinking about the potential for prevention and early help, there's different ways that we can do that. Initially, we'll identify any concerns we might have about that individual. We may be required to report those concerns and start inquiries. However, we need to ask ourselves, is it appropriate to, and have we explored the possibilities of prevention and early help to address any emerging concerns and avoid those problems and risks from escalating? And as you will see on the slide within the procedures, there is a pointer for practice that covers the key principles for effective early help interventions. So if we have concerns about adults who maybe are not yet meeting the definition of an adult at risk, there are a number of things that we can do to support them. Firstly, we can work with the adult and their carers to avoid any situations arising that are likely to lead to the adult being at risk. Secondly, we should look to identify and address any emerging concerns which might lead to an adult becoming an adult at risk if those concerns are not resolved. So some questions we might want to ask. What are my concerns about the adult that, if they're not addressed, could cause them to become an adult at risk or of abuse or neglect? Am I concerned that a carer's behaviour could lead to abuse or neglect? What information do I have to support my concerns? So should an individual reach the point that you are concerned or suspect that they are an adult at risk, the procedures set out that you have a duty to report that individual to the local authority. The duty to report simply means a responsibility to make a referral to social services whenever there are concerns that an adult is experiencing abuse or neglect, is at risk of experiencing abuse or neglect, and they have needs for care and support that mean they are unable to protect themselves against abuse, neglect, or the risk of it. Those key bullet points are the definition of an adult at risk that we explored in section 1. So what is the concern? The concern that you may have may not always be evidenced. Hence I suspect there is an adult at risk. It could be based on information you've received from different sources, your own professional judgment, or seemingly insignificant information on first appearance, but that insignificant information could be part of a bigger picture of what's happening for that individual. These situations, whether there is no clear factual evidence, are referred to as concerns. A reminder that abuse can occur anywhere. It can occur anytime, and it can be done by anyone. So how would we go about seeking advice if we had a concern that an adult was at risk of abuse or neglect? The first port of call is to seek advice from your organisation's designated safeguarding person. If you're not sure who that designated safeguarding person, then you need to make sure that you go and seek to find out who that is. The designated safeguarding person is a requirement of the procedures, and they are the person within the organisation who will know whether to raise a safeguarding concern with the local authority and will manage any immediate actions to ensure the individual at risk is safe from abuse. If, however, there is a delay in being able to contact the designated safeguarding person, and this places the individual at risk, or the designated safeguarding person has not taken action and you are still concerned, or maybe the concern is about or involves the designated safeguarding person and you have no other manager to contact, then it is important that you make contact with social services to seek advice from them. It is important to recognise that seeking advice does not mean you've fulfilled your duty to report. You may seek advice from social services, and on the basis of that advice, you are not going to proceed with a report. You may seek advice from social services and determine that, yes, this is an individual adult at risk. If this is the case, you are responsible for making the report to social services. Telling social services about your concerns does not mean that you have made a report. We all have a duty to report. We will seek to contact social services, but there may be occasions where we need to contact the emergency services. If you have a concern about a professional, a carer, or a volunteer, you also have a duty to report that particular individual. It's important not to ignore or dismiss suspicions about anyone who may be abusing, neglecting, or causing harm to an adult at risk. The procedures extends the duty to report into our private lives. So if we have concern about the behaviour of a friend, family member, neighbour, who is also a practitioner, then this must be reported. Section 5 of the procedures covers the arrangements that need to be put in place to safeguard individuals where allegations or concerns are raised against practitioners and those in positions of trust. You are expected to report your concerns to the Social Services Department where the safeguarding concern is thought to have occurred. However, if you are unsure which local authority to report to, contact your local Social Services Department for advice. If the concern is identified outside of the office hours of social services, then you are required to contact that local authority's emergency duty team. They will receive the concern outside of normal office hours. There may, however, be occasions when you do need to contact the police and maybe other emergency services. You must contact the police without delay if the adult at risk that you have concerns about is in imminent danger. If there are other people who may also be in imminent danger, or someone has committed a crime against an adult at risk. You must call an ambulance if the person needs urgent medical attention. If the adult has risk and has capacity to make the decision to contact the police, then you must seek to gain their consent to make that report and contact to the police. If they do not consent, you must respect their decision unless there are justifiable reasons to act against their wishes. And the justifiable reasons set out in the procedures include the following. The adult's unable to give consent due to coercion or undue influence. There's an overriding public interest. It's necessary to prevent imminent danger or distress, or it is a life-threatening situation. So at this point, it may be timely to take some time to consider what your organisational processes are for reporting an adult at risk. Do those processes cover the definitions of an adult at risk that we talked about in section 1? And what gaps do you think there may be? So where will these concerns first arise? The procedures identify that there are a number of sources of concern. It could be that the source of concern comes from a member of the general public. All practitioners working to these procedures have a duty to report any concerns they are alerted to by the general public, remembering that this applies in work and private life. If a member of the public tells you about a concern, you have a duty to report that concern to social services. And the slide here sets out the actions that you are required to take. It's important to note that the individual member of the public raising the concern does have a right to remain anonymous if they wish to. However, this may not always be possible. It will not be possible if the case concerning the adult at risk then goes through to a court case or criminal proceedings. You must not leave it to the member of the public raising the concern to contact social services themselves. The duty to report sits with you as the individual. If it's the adult at risk themselves who makes the disclosure that they've been harmed, abused, or neglected, or at risk of abuse or neglect, or they are aware of another person who may be or is being abused or neglected, you have a duty to report that. These are not necessarily easy circumstances to deal with. And set out on the slide and further supported by a pointer for practice within the procedures are some tips, hints, guides as to how to go about managing the disclosure by an adult at risk themselves. So in managing that disclosure, you must report your concerns immediately to your line manager and or your designated safeguarding person. Ensure that those concerns are reported immediately to social services and record without delay and within 24 hours what you have been told using the person's exact words, the circumstances in which the disclosure happened, the date, time, place, and people who were present. Be sure to separate fact from opinion in your records. Before we make a report, however, it's important that we've considered the individual adult at risk's capacity and their consent to the making of that report. Consent means that a person makes an informed decision to give their permission to the report being made. For consent to be valid, it must be voluntary and informed, and the person consenting must have the freedom and the capacity to give it. When we refer to voluntary and informed, we need to think about whether the decision of the individual to consent or not is made by them and is not influenced by pressure from other individuals. In terms of informed consent, the person must have all the information about what is involved with making a report. This must include the benefits and risks of making the report, whether there are reasonable alternatives, and an explanation of what could happen if the practitioner does not make that report to social services. When we refer to the freedom and capacity to consent to the report, when making a judgment about the person's freedom, we need to be confident that they are not being subjected to violence or the fear of violence, they are not being unlawfully detained, and they are not being intentionally deceived. For consent to be valid, the person consenting must have the mental capacity to give it. It is important to note that mental capacity is specific to a particular decision at a particular time. This means a person has the capacity to make some decisions, but not others. Decisions on some occasion, but not others. So, for example, the adult at risk may or may not have the capacity to be in an abusive relationship. This does not necessarily mean they have the capacity to consent to the report of that abuse being made. The provisions of mental capacity are covered in the Mental Capacity Act. So where we have concerns about the mental capacity of an individual to make the decision, it may be that we have to initiate our duties under the mental capacity legislation. When we talk about mental capacity, it's important to note that the person must be able to do the 4 points identified in this box. Can they understand the information that is relevant to the decision? Can they retain that information long enough to start to weigh up their options? Can they use or weigh up the information then to make an informed choice? And finally, can they communicate their decisions? It's important to note that these 4 bullet points here are also identified as barriers to participation in the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, particularly under Part 10 that talks about advocacy. So as well as considering whether an individual has the capacity to consent to the report being made to social care, in our practice more generally, if we are actively promoting the voice, choice and control of the individual, we're working co-productively, and we're making sure that they're fully involved in decisions in other aspects of their life, then we must be establishing whether these 4 barriers are present for that individual or not. The mental capacity legislation goes on to say that a person lacks capacity if their mind is impaired or disturbed in some way. That means they're unable to make the decision. And there are some examples here of when their capacity may be impaired. So we need to think about the most appropriate timing, location of having the conversation with the individual to raise our concerns and then discuss the potential for making a report to social services. We should not assume that a person does not have capacity because they are perceived as being in a risky situation. As was referred to in the section 1 video, there is a presumption of capacity implicit through all of these procedures. There is in the procedures, as you can see, a pointer for practice that refers to promoting participation amongst adults at risk with and without mental capacity. So if I'm having to consider if an individual has mental capacity, not every one of you will be undertaking a mental capacity assessment. However, it will be for you to determine if you feel that person has the capacity to consent to the report being made. And this slide highlights some of the questions you may wish to explore when you are establishing or assessing the mental capacity of that individual. Within the procedures, there is a very helpful pointer for practice which expands on this set of questions further. It gives you some indicators to explore and to observe when you are making a decision as to whether you think that individual has the capacity to consent to the report being made. There may, however, be occasions when you do not need the consent of the individual. You may override the adult's wishes. For example, the adult wish that you do not make the report to social services. You may override their wish if the duty to report supersedes their wish, and in that the person lacks the capacity. Not you have made an assumption that they lack capacity, but there has been a judgment and evidence considered that confirms for you the person doesn't have capacity. That the scenario the individual is in meets the serious harm test, that there may be other people at risk, a crime is suspected or may have been committed, and there are concerns relating to failure in care. There may be occasions when you seek to not gain the consent in the first instance. You will only do this if it puts the adult at further risk. If by notifying them of your concern and intention to make a report, it puts the adult in a situation whereby they will be threatened or coerced into silence, or important evidence may be destroyed. It may also be that the alleged abuser is the carer or a family member. It may be that the individual does not want the carer to be involved. The General Data Protection Regulations, GDPR, does give individuals greater control over their personal data. However, it does not give them the right to prevent agencies sharing information if the two conditions on the screen in front of you are satisfied. It is very important to note that if you are making a report without consent from the adult at risk, you must record the reasons for this. You must inform social services that consent has not been given by the individual or that you are going against their wishes. But you must inform the adult that a report has been made despite their wishes, unless the following criteria has been satisfied. So at this point, it may be timely to consider the questions presented in front of you and to reflect on what you've heard so far more generally. A reminder that when we're gathering information at any of the stages, as was described at the opening of this video, there are some helpful questions that you may wish to ask. What's causing me to think the individual is at risk of harm? What is it that I know? When I'm assessing and analysing that information, what does that information say to me about the adult I consider to be at risk? What needs to happen next? Are there any immediate actions that are necessary? How will the identified actions contribute to keeping the person safe and improving their lived experience? That could include, how will the decision and the action to make that report and to trigger inquiries to be made improve the lived experience and the safety of that individual? And how will we know that the outcomes, the areas that matter to that individual have been achieved? What evidence do we have or will we have to demonstrate to us that those person-centred outcomes have been achieved and that the person is now safe from risk or the risk has been reduced to a satisfactory level? So we've considered early intervention and prevention. We've established capacity or otherwise. We've made the decision that we meet the requirement to make a report to social services. A summary here of the stages that you followed thus far. Discuss the concern with the designated safeguarding person and made a documentation of that concern in the discussion. Through the discussion with a designated safeguarding person or appropriate alternative manager, you may reach one of 4 decisions. The first may be that on the basis of the information that you've gathered, there is no further action that is needed. It may be that as an organisation, you're able to provide support or services to the adult as they are not at risk at this stage. If your decision is either no further action or that you will provide services internally as an organisation, you must record the rationale for that decision when you are recording the wider concerns in the discussion that's been held. It may be that you identify that the adult has potential care and support needs that require further assessment by social services. If this is the case, then you will make a referral to social services for a care and support needs assessment. It's important at this point to note the distinction between a referral to social services for care and support and a report to social services that an adult is at risk. And finally, the 4th decision may be that the adult is at risk of abuse. Therefore, you have a duty to report to social services the concerns that you have about that individual. When making a report about a safeguarding concern to social services, the procedures clearly set out the information that is required to be reported within that safeguarding report. This includes the basic information that you may have about the adult at risk, the nature and the cause of your concern, any immediate protection plans that may be in place, and any relevant proportionate information you may have to provide insight. It is important to note that at this point, you are not being asked to investigate the matter. You are reporting the concern that you have based on the information that you have available. Any discussion about an adult at risk should be recorded in writing, and the report that is made to social services must be made using the report form provided by the Regional Safeguarding Board. These report form templates are not available in the procedures themselves. They need to be accessed and/or requested via the Regional Safeguarding Board. If you have initially made the report by phone, the procedures require that you confirm it in writing using the report form within 24 hours. It is important to note that if you have any immediate concerns about an individual, that you do not delay in taking any action. So when the report is submitted to social services, They are required to respond to you within 7 days, 7 working days. In doing so, they will repeat the key points that you have raised, check the evidence that you have provided, and establish who else knows about the report that has been made. It's important to note that as the individual making the report, you should be prepared and willing to do the following things: assist in any further inquiries that may be requested, contribute to a strategy discussion or meeting if this is to be held, attend an adult protection conference with a written report, and contribute to any further assessments. The points set out here will be explored further in sections 3 and 4 of the procedures. Again, it is your duty to make sure that that report is submitted and received by the local authority. If you have not heard back from social services within 7 days, the onus is on you to then follow up that report if required. So, to bring section 2 to a close, again, a reminder that the procedures are bringing about a significant shift in culture and practice. Not dissimilar to the POVA procedures, we do need to consider whether the individual has the capacity to consent to the report being made to social services. We move from a set of procedures, though, where the capacity of the individual is sometimes in doubt, and the service or organisation's duties to protect the individual sometimes neglected the focus on the individual's capacity or otherwise. We therefore move with the new procedures to a presumption of capacity being implicit throughout the procedures. We're moving from procedures that previously were focused on restricting people's choices and on the risk more than the person, to procedures that now focus on the adult at risk being central to all decision making. When we are using risk assessments, and the decision and the action to make a report in essence is a risk assessment, that those risk assessments or approaches or decisions support people to have as much freedom and control as possible, stroke appropriate. And we are moving from a focus of proving or disproving abuse and neglect to one that focuses on promoting protection planning and early intervention and prevention. This is the end of section 2. The next video to follow will cover section 3 of the procedures.